I've been thinking a lot about Stormtroopers lately, especially as we get closer to the rise of Skywalker, and it's actually been really interesting to see Lucasfilm maneuver around the Stormtrooper question in the stories released after The Force Awakens. The Last Jedi even lightly tackles the paradox presented in Episode 7 and positions Finn as special, or at least initially a special coward, motivated by fear and uninterested in the ideological conflict between the Resistance and the First Order. I'm not going to dig too much into that because Episode 9 is going to expand or even conclude Finn's journey, and I feel going too deep now would be premature. But I do want to talk about Solo and Resistance because I feel like they perfectly encapsulate Lucasfilm's successes and failures respectively. To get people up to speed, the Stormtrooper question is a pretty simple one. What role do the faceless and disposable armies of an evil empire actually play in the story, and how does that interact with the story's themes and characters? In other words, what does the existence of a Stormtrooper mean? It's not just a question limited to Star Wars either, as all sorts of franchises and settings have their own Stormtrooper equivalents and need to answer the question. It doesn't have to be profound either. The original trilogy treats Stormtroopers as obedient enforcers of Empire, legitimate threats to the Rebellion's goals of restoring democracy to the galaxy. But they're not much more than that. They're just an extension of the Emperor's or Darth Vader's will, and you don't see any relationships or motivations of rank-and-file soldiers. And that's fine. Not every element of a work of art needs to be laboriously detailed. Some things can just be. Of course, we still have to be careful with the details you do add, otherwise you might make the armies of the big bad evil dude clash with your themes as well as with your heroes. This is where the Stormtrooper Paradox fits in. It's a video originally made by Pop Culture Detective, and I'll leave a link in the description below. But to recap, Finn creates a sizable amount of tension with the themes of The Force Awakens because the film doesn't do a good job of explaining why Finn gets to be a hero we root for, while also celebrating the death and defeat of his fellow Stormtroopers. As far as we know, the rest of the Stormtrooper Corps is just as much a victim of the First Order as Finn, and they could all be just scared child soldiers obedient to the Supreme Leader out of a lifetime of fear rather than an ideological loyalty. It makes many of our heroes' victories over the First Order unintentionally tragic. How many potential Finns get snuffed out in the Resistance attempts at stopping the First Order at any cost? Which is why it's so frustrating that Tamara Ravora's own character arc in Star Wars Resistance runs into a lot of the same problems. It's a fantastic arc and my favorite of the whole first season in spite of its issues, but it still undercuts itself in favor of a cool moment that muddies the whole thing. Kaz's arrival on the Colossus results in Tam getting fed a chain of lies and broken promises that only result in her increasing isolation from the rest of the crew. Her grandfather's experience as a factory hand in the Imperial shipyards also colors her view of the First Order. The Empire provided job security for her family after the Clone Wars, so she naively believes that its authoritarian approach to peace and order didn't also require the exploitation of her family or genocidal punishments. Even when she learns about the Tehar massacre, Tam's naivety prevents her from accepting the truth as presented to her by both Kel and Ela, instead defaulting to an unconvincing, maybe they had a good reason. It's pretty easy to see how her trust in authority and sense of betrayal upon learning that Kaz and Yeager were working for the Resistance perfectly positioned her to be picked up by the First Order, and I feel it makes for a compelling allegory for how otherwise well-meaning people can suddenly get seduced by the dark side. Except Tam's decision to join the First Order comes right after the very public destruction of Hazian Prime, and there's zero mention of it. It would be one thing if the destruction of the Hazian system happened after Tam joined the First Order and we had to see her wrestle with the fact that people who promised her the ability to fly also committed an act of genocide as a declaration of war. But instead we get this awkward standoff between Tam and her friends as they plead for her to stay on the Colossus. You'd expect either Kaz or Yeager to mention Hazian's destruction to convince Tam of the First Order's evil, or at least give Tam the opportunity to rationalize the attack, but instead she just walks off with her new best friend, Agent Tierney. It feels like a missed opportunity that undercuts Tam's own character arc. We know that she inherently cares about people, and even though she weakly deflected the First Order's involvement at the Tehar massacre, she's clearly troubled by the possibility that the First Order would do such a thing. If things go as expected, then Tam is most likely going to redeem herself sometime before the end of the second season, as her naivety fades away and the First Order's evil becomes more nakedly apparent. It would be a fine and straightforward arc, but the billions of voices that cried out in terror and would suddenly silence will always hang over it. If all it took for Tam to come to her senses is first-hand experience with the First Order's cruelty, why doesn't blowing up 3 planets count? It's an inconsistent level of self-centered callousness caused more by awkward timing rather than a purposeful reveal of Tam's character. Of course, at the time of this video's release, Resistance hasn't reached its conclusion. It's entirely possible that the second season expertly navigates the Hazian atrocity, but as of right now, It just feels like a clumsy misordering of major events. But it's not all missteps and missed opportunities. A ton of Lucasfilm's new content does a great job of filling out the world without contradicting itself, and Solo, a Star Wars story, absolutely knocks it out of the park. The movie dove deeply into particular misfortunes of Han's birth and the role the Empire plays in it. We see the Empire conspiring with organized crime, separating families and violently suppressing the Mimbanese, all while punishing Han for showing initiative and drawing attention to potential corruption. The Empire is filled with career grifters and sycophants, easily manipulated by bold opportunists as long as it doesn't disrupt whatever illusion of authority or control it tries to project. Even the film's regular stormtroopers display a sadistic streak as they take bets on how quickly Chewbacca will kill and eat Han, but the absolute best example is, ironically, a deleted scene that's expanded upon in the novelization. Lucasfilm actually ended up cutting Han's time at the Flight Academy because it felt it was redundant, which is fine. The movie is about Han, and a lot of his character is similarly explored throughout the rest of the film. But it does perfectly explore the ways in which the Empire is able to take the evil at the very top and force it down into the backbone of the Imperial military. Han is a talented pilot, and that's the only thing keeping him from getting kicked out of the Navy. His creativity and talent come at the cost of a maverick attitude that has a difficult time following orders or staying in formation, which eventually gets him court-martialed. But Han isn't reckless or hunting for glory. He admits in his trial that he disobeyed orders and broke formation in order to save the life of one of his squad mates. He refused to eject from his TIE fighter because he knew he could successfully land it in the shuttle bay instead of abandoning it in the cold vacuum of space. But the Emperor's Navy doesn't care about outcome or intents. It only cares about discipline and loyalty, and so they ship him off to Mimban. With access to a galaxy of near infinite resources, the Empire is able to trivially replace both men and material in order to maintain Palpatine's authoritarian machine. People who show creativity or compassion without conforming to strict chains of command will get punished, and at that point, anyone too stupid or stubborn to fall in line will leave the military in either prison shackles or a body bag. That's why all stormtroopers are bad. The very top of the institution molds them through fear and punishment into obedient weapons of terror and oppression. Any member of the Imperial military with the naivety or willingness to work from within to change it for the better will either be forced to play along or have a very short career. What makes it all the more impressive when people like Han or Wedge or even Agent Kallus manage to escape. It's both courageous and humbling to leave the beating heart of such a hegemonic institution. To then turn around and eventually fight to dismantle it is an even greater feat. Is there still a tragic element? Yes. Through propaganda and systemic poverty, the Empire is able to exploit the most vulnerable populations from all across the galaxy. Entire lives are destroyed and cultures erased in service of one man's insatiable lust for power for its own sake. But you don't weep for the Stormtrooper. You weep for who they could have been if it weren't for the Emperor's touch. Thanks for watching.